The game is 18 I think this is Marflow Games. This is particularly rough for me, 18XX. It's been a while since I've done an 18XX, and one of the reasons is I only have a couple left, and they're sort of treats, so I like to hold off. The reason I'm doing this one is I'm pasting together counters for distant foreign fields, whatever the hell it is. Found out that, yeah, the counters would be unplayable unglued, so I'm putting them together, but it's basically like doing a PNP type project with a lot of counters, not a humongous amount, not like EU8 would be or whatever. Okay. First things first, I'm assuming a familiarity with 18XX here. I figure the only people who are going to look at this, a fairly obscure 18XX, are either 18XX fans or people who have watched my videos and have watched the 18XX stuff. If you don't fit into one of those categories, you probably shouldn't be looking at this. If you don't already know 18XX, you shouldn't be playing this one first. This is one of the, well, it's definitely one of the more complex things to do. Let's take a look at components. So I'm guessing this is what Marflow sells you, rather than like the actual player, the actual prior owner, because I bought this used. Laminated stuff and everything. But the board comes in two sections, laminated. All the track tiles are laminated. They are weird. First of all, there aren't a lot of normal track tiles, especially for cities and whatnot. But there are a lot of these things with little M's on them. And what drew me to this game was that it covered not just the railways, but the industry that grew up around and really kind of made the railways valuable to begin with, which is the coal and steel plants in the Ruhr Valley. And you could do this in a lot of different areas, the same kind of thing. Unfortunately, it doesn't do it the way I would have liked it to be done, which would feel a little bit more like a railroad tycoon type thing, where you're building up, say, those core industries, and cities are building up and growing, not just as pre-programmed or whatever, which is really what the 18XX flavor is. Something that allows you to build track and invest in industries. But it gets a lot of it right enough that I'm like, yeah, that's not too bad. Apparently there's another one, starts with an H. Same company, I think, that handles this in a different manner, a more complex manner. Unfortunately, like, I'm kind of out of hunting down games to get. I'm like, oh, there's so many fucking games. Something like that I might actually go out of my way for. You know, an 18XX that I know handles something that I'm very interested in. So, basically, these things with M's on them go anywhere where there's a red or a black star. Those are going to be your coal and steel companies. Now, one of the things that this gets right is that not all the coal and steel companies are going to be owned by the players, which I think is pretty important. Because yes, the railways maybe did invest in them and whatnot, but there was no monolithic, you know, the way that the way that the railways had sort of a monopoly on their routes or whatever. There was nothing quite like that. Although later in the game, consolidation does allow you to get more of that, but it also kind of doesn't matter. And you'll see why when we explain how these things work. You also have some specific locations like D's and E's, and then some weird things like this, which isn't upgradable because it's gray, but it has like a town, but they didn't want to put it in the center because you wouldn't want the dot to block it. This counts as a major, as a city. I'm going to call them cities and towns. They call them large and small cities. This doesn't count as a city in terms of blocking capability, but it does count against your trains as a city. And there's another one, steel here. Its upgrade moves the city off the rail track so it can't be blocked anymore. An interesting concept. It's not described in the rules. Now, I'm using the original version of the game, rules version 1.0. The designer claimed he was just clarifying the rules. If so, there are hints about the version 2 rules that seem to indicate that I either got everything all wrong about some stuff, which is not surprising if that is the case. But it feels like there's changes in them. And I'll go over some of those in a little, at least one of the ones that I caught. You got your company charters. These are your choo-choo companies. You got a few little privates, but then you have these, which look kind of like miners from other games in terms of the size and whatnot, but they got all this other shit on them. These are the coal and steel companies. The steel is red, the coal will be black on the other side like that. Why are they differentiated? There are minor differences between them, and they use a differentiated counter mix so that the capacity for how much can be produced is actually limited. Okay, I'm trying to think here. The key to these, both types, is that you buy these improvements, and they are what is going to produce your revenue off of them. And there's rules on the improvements as to how you can buy them and what status they're in. They might become inactive, in which case they no longer provide revenue. We got some modifiers here. This is to indicate that a coal or steel company is connected to its rail route. And then once that's the case, you can buy a switching train for it, which will allow it to count its highest valued location a second time. Now, these are coal and steel corporations, which can be formed by merging the little guys into them. And they're allowed to merge a number of little guys equal to the spots on there. All of this is not like clearly laid out in the rules. It can be inferred as you read specifics, but there's nowhere where it, like, you know, talks about the new types of components that are here and what's going on with them. And I have to say, I played. So I started this twice already, not on video, but I started it twice because I knew that this was going to be a hard one and that it was going to have concepts that I didn't quite get. The first time I fucked so much up, both not catching the rules, because again, the rules are not well written, but also in terms of getting you the concepts across. They're well enough written that, you know, if you're following them as a cookbook or whatever, you can probably start to understand what's going on eventually. So I made it through a few operating rounds and then said, look, I've fucked this up so much it's not playable anymore. And I restarted it. I still fucked stuff up. I suspect I will on this as well. Simply because there's concepts that are very new, that are hard to not understand, but to kind of remember when you're so used to playing normal 18xx's, and there's shit that just, didn't stick in my head in the rules. I think I've caught it all, but I'm not sure. The second time I played it, until we got to basically midway through the 6 trains, the game, I'll explain the trains in a little bit, but the game wasn't over, but it was entering the stage where it was going to be really, really tedious, and I'm usually very tired by the time I'm making it through that stage in a game. And this one looks like it has a long tail at the end. It does have some surprising things. Let's talk about the trains, because they're not trains. They're capital expenditures. And they have a number of pieces of information on them. Again, not well described. So this is a 2 train for a choo-choo company if it pays $100 million. But if one of your Montans wants to buy it, it can buy this. It discards it, basically. So they're working off the same industrial base, okay? And it could buy a switching train. Now, I think this is the price it pays for the switching train, and it gets that type. Or it could buy an improvement. The improvement costs $50 million. The number of squares here, and this is something I fucked up, are how many different improvements you get, and A and B indicate that you can buy either of these types. Now, you can't lay down Bs unless you have that many As already laid down. And that's kind of important. Because as they get higher up, C's start getting more valuable. D's and E's, I think, are, well, yeah, D's and E's are also more valuable. And later on, these get bigger. So you can see on the 3, for $80 million, you get 2 of these improvements of better quality. So you're getting a good investment value off of buying the bigger ones. Now, I want to talk about the fact that they're sharing them, but first I need to swap batteries and whatnot. I was very leery about the idea that you're sharing. So like, if choo-choo companies are buying these, basically game phase changes still occur to these, and they run out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. Very much the same kind of structure to the game phases. This is another thing I have a grump about. These player aids, they contain information that's not in the rules. Now, I tend to read rules and not look at the player aids unless I feel like I need to for something or another. I knew I would need to see this one because I knew some of the upgrades were fucked up. It kind of actually alluded to that. But what wasn't clear to me was some of the information that's contained on here and how that kind of arranges itself. So for example, the game phases is not in the rule book. Now obviously I was going to look at that to use it, but what it meant is I didn't get to kind of zone out on it prior to starting to play. if it had been in the rule book. This is kind of weird given the limited level of printing that the game, I don't know, paper's paper, I guess. It's going to cost you no matter what. Anyway, the interesting thing about these CapX cards is that they're shared between the two. Now, initially, that caused kind of a recoil to me because it's like, are they really competing for the same industrial plant and whatnot? Sort of. Does it make sense that these guys would affect how quickly trains come out? Yeah, a lot. Actually, it makes more sense than trains buying, than train companies buying more trains, is that as the industrial output becomes, more and more impressive, that's actually at least as much a driver of, improved trains coming out. So it's kind of this interesting means of representing a lot of what's going on, and I've grown kind of fond of it already. Although when I first read it, it seemed really weird that like they'd be dealing with the same stuff. For shares, we got some interesting ones here. And this game breaks a number of things that you'd expect, as far as I can tell. Okay, so most of the corporations have a 20% share for the presidency and 8 remaining certificates. There are a couple of exceptions. This DDE, or DDGE, has 3 20% shares. This one works like the others, but it's kind of more limited. That's not a complete block, but neither is this. The factory shares, the Monton corporations, those are all, they're 5 20% shares. And so you have to pay twice the base price on them, and they, when you merge in, you get a 20% share. What else do you have? A nice flat stock market. Nothing too exciting here. It's not volatile at all. This is not a game about stock manipulation. It's possible to rape companies in this, but there aren't a whole hell of a lot. You might want to keep control of one just for that extra certificate. Certificate limit is relatively low. In 6 players, it's 13. That's not that low, but there's a lot of shit playing around in it. The privates. Okay. The first one is associated with the BME here. It allows you, this looks and sounds a lot like the B&O, the Baltimore and Ohio private from 1830. It costs $140. It allows you to set the price of this. It can be anywhere up to $80. Normally, you're only able to start companies between $50 and $70 in the first era. So you can make some money off of setting the price a little higher. It pays 20 marks, actually, not millions. Okay, it pays 20 per turn, but it doesn't go away when the company runs. It gives you the special ability of not losing the directorship while you have this, even if somebody surpasses your shares. That's weird. But this goes away as soon as I'm going to call them trains, the CapXs, as soon as the 4 comes out. Now, something else happens. Yeah, other stuff happens when the 4 comes out. In particular, we get this Montan round, which allows you to start forming the corporations out of the factories. So that's a kind of interesting one. This one pays you a straight 20 per turn. Good payoff, a third of its value. Let me just make sure I understand it right. Oh, by the way, as soon as you lose this, you might lose control of the company. This one you can't get rid of until the 5 train comes out, in which case it's killed. Now, normally the 5 train kills all privates. That doesn't seem to be the case. There's 2 other privates in here, these Pferdebahnen. It doesn't say they get destroyed at any point, so I don't think they do. They produce 10 marks for the entire game if you want. But the other thing that they can do is they can link up a Montan to the rail net if it's already got track running through its hex. And this expends it, and this is the way to get rid of these, because here you are making 10 per turn, but it's taking up one of your certificate, and at some point in the game you will definitely want to play these. The rules on it make it sound like it can only be used in very limited circumstances. I'm expanding that, and I think that's what's intended, but I'm not certain. Basically, any unattached, So if you own the Montan, you can play this to connect it. Or if your rail company connects to a Montan, you can play this to connect it. There are other ways to do that, and somebody could actually make it so you can't close these if all of the Montans are connected or there's no rail to them. You might not be able to actually use these at all. Anyway. Another thing you have is this. The Montan minor companies, whatever, are placed in numerical order here. This is kind of a big deal because there's a clutter of numbers. You use these number counters on the board for them, and these other counters here on that track. Now those are distinguished by name, but sometimes I don't feel like they get the right name. This is a location marker, and the other kind is a status marker. The status is used over there. Now, the location marker, they have these others for passive PMGs. I'm not sure that they're actually necessary or even a good idea. I don't know. I can't make up my mind about that. But let's see. I guess these are to replace for the ones that aren't used. I don't know. I didn't do that in my playthrough, and I'm really not sure whether they're going to help or hinder. The information, the number is not necessarily at all useful, so I guess they're okay, but all right. To begin with, you have to pick your scenario. Now, I did this Helweg as my first one. I may shake it up I'm going to shake it up and pick another one. You've got 5 different scenarios. What do the different scenarios mean? They determine which 8 of these companies are in play. are available to players. They'll be part of the opening packet the players get. The others will be, and I'll try using these in this one, will be passives. They exist. They can be hooked up. They can form these corporations. They impact the price that the rails can make going through locations, but nobody is going to be running them as privates. They may just end up sitting there and doing almost nothing. There's some value to trying to start a train company, a train corporation, near what you control of these. Now these are kind of interesting. They have a little marker here which indicates, can you make an expansion value off of them? If it's got a question mark, if you swallow on the first turn, you can. If it's got an X, no matter what you do, you can't expand right away. And if it's got a check, you can expand on the first turn. I don't know how big a deal that is, because you might be making good income off of it as it starts. And I also played these completely wrong in the first playthrough, where basically I was only giving one token until I caught myself and then started giving multiple. But so I'm not sure how valuable they are. They didn't produce a lot of income for me. They've got an interesting facet to them. If they've got a little rail on them, you can't build those improvements until you're rail connected. And you have starting value of these. Again, not well described in the rules, but okay. The starting package. I'm going to be playing a 6-player game, which means all 4 privates will be in play. If you're playing a 3 or 5-player game, they're not that way. For some reason 4, because they want to make sure that everybody gets the same amount of packet items. Okay. Starting capital, obviously. Your actual packet. Okay. So in the 6-player game, you're going to have the private BME, the Ruhr Shift, these 2 Pferdens, and then the 8 companies in order down here. Whoever has the priority, and its seating and whatnot is all random, just like it should be in any 18XX, may buy from column A or column B one of the first 3 things. So that'll be the lowest couple of those Montagne companies or these. Or they can pass. The next player gets the same option. The first 3 remaining on the column, etc. The game, you have to sell this out. There's no auction in it. You have to sell this out in order to start buying stock shares. At the end of the first stock round, if all of these are sold out, that's great. Then you get to start the game. Otherwise, these suckers get to produce and operate, and nobody gets to lay any rail tracks. So somebody who's playing as a holdout, the people who have stuff get an advantage out of it. So in general, the guy who's playing as a holdout probably wants to break down and buy them. These are not valuable in the way that like the 1830 privates are. You can't sell these to a company, to a corporation. These you can merge into. They're kind of like miners. Unlike miners, and they kind of work like them. They don't get any share value. They could eventually form a corporation, kind of a la 2038. They can produce okay money, and they split it 50-50 or swallow. Their choice. Anyway, after the first stock round, priority deal goes to whoever has the most cash. After every other stock round, priority goes to the guy who passed first. I got a break for bed. Problem is, it's Sunday. I slept all day Saturday, but then got to sleep around like 7, I think, maybe later, and it's still before noon, so I didn't get a lot of sleep, and I'm not quite sure what's going on in my life. It's basically like summertime too. I was like up in the mid 80s today, or should get there. About this that's kind of painful is the rules are laid out differently from most XXs. Probably the designer's choice. It makes it, you're not getting hit with the stuff you're used to getting hit with. I'm going to go through it as they kind of do. Now, I talked about the different privates, the active Montan. Now, that's these things, they have an option when they operate of withholding 100% or splitting 50-50 like a miner would. You know, this is weird because normally this kind of stuff would be in a section on them as opposed to just a slice out of discussing the companies, and then they go to corporations. The corporations all work more or less like in most XXs. The percentage is the percent of the dividends that you're going to get. Now, it's not absolutely clear that 20%, at least I don't think I found someplace where it is, that these 20% shares sell for twice the value, but that seems to be implied. We have these different corporations, and then these guys are all fictional. The railways apparently aren't, and I guess these are not, like Krupp. But these conglomerated corporations for coal and steel aren't. I would rather they gave real ones. I know things like the Railways of the Midlands and whatnot. I don't know. There's some XX games that allow you to pick your corporation and a starting location, and you can put them in the wrong places. Not sure if Midlands was one of them. You know, it's really not that big a deal if I had a specific named one if it doesn't show up where it's supposed to. The directory. The director works very much like in any XX game. It changes hands when somebody has more than the current director in general. Okay, the DGEE, that's under here. That has different shares. Like I said, three 20%ers. You can buy the ordinary shares. Now, the director's share can only be purchased after the KWB which doesn't exist, but there's a KWE, I think that's what it is, which is up here, performs an operating round. Now, that would make it sound like I can't even buy shares of it. That was my assumption. That doesn't seem to be the case. It seems like you can buy shares before the director buys his share, but if you buy the first share, you set the price for it. We'll see if that's spelled out when we get to corporation, when we get to the stock dealing, but that's sort of the last thing in the whole rule book, which feels completely wrong to me. The other special one is the EH here, which is a conglomerate of various little railways. It cannot start an operating round before the first 5 CAPEX card has been bought, but the shares can be purchased before. Okay, that would work fine because then the director's share could be purchased. Let me look at this because, so buying shares, no shares can be bought as long as any of the initial packet is available. I think every initial stock round ends with the priority going to the person with the most money. If all the privates have been bought, then you can buy. A railway's first available share is always its director's share. That seems pretty clear to me. Which to me means, what did we have here? You can't buy any DGEE, and maybe the 2.0 rules have changed this because there appeared to be questions about other things. The EH, you would have to buy the director's share. You can't actually start it, though, but you can buy the shares. But it's pretty questionable to buy shares that aren't going to make you money. The thing with this is, it is actually, the DGEE is not that great a location. The EH, which I guess is the HE over here, they may have corrected these things in the later edition, is in a pretty good location. It would be the top company in terms of location if I were to choose, one from at least the time I was playing. All right, we've got the Monton companies. Not all of them get dealt out. Remember, I think there's maybe 10 that don't because there's enough token. No, I think there's 8 that don't. These don't belong to a player. They don't carry out any actions during the operating round, but they can do 3 things, or players can do 3 things with them. A corporation can build a railway link for them. The company pays 30 from its treasury to the bank. The location marker will be turned over. Okay, so this is the location marker. It has 2 sides, this one and this one. The second side indicates an increase in the value of that hex to pass through it. Turn it on to the side with a value of 10. Each railway company which has a route including that location marker may add 10 marks to the income of the route. The certificate of a Ferdinand may be used to build a railway link for any passive PMG which is in a hex containing. This will close it. But elsewhere it says that basically you have to either own this or own a railway company that can connect to that. It's not spelled out here. A passive PMG with a location marker showing the 10 value. This is done a lot here, this little typo thing. Forte Foundation can be used in order to float a new Montan Corporation, but those can only happen once the 4 trains come out. Okay. Operating rounds. Okay. All the private companies pay out. Then the PMGs take turn order based on the number on them, just like miners would in a lot of games. And then the corporations do it in share value order. Okay. For the Montans, whether they're PMGs or corporations, you calculate the income from all their development markers plus income for switch trains. So you add up the value of all the active ones of these that are on their card, and if they're switch trains, each switch train gets to fire off on the most valuable one to cause it to create more money. Then you get the choice of splitting. Okay, so for the PMGs, these things, you can split it 50-50 or swallow 100%. For the Montan, you either pay 100% dividend or swallow 100%, and the dividend will be paid divided out by the percentages that you hold. If it's a corporation, it goes up in value by 1 space if it pays out a positive amount of money, and it goes back a space if it doesn't. Then they're allowed to do one thing as a purchase. They can buy development markers through the acquisition of 1 Capex card. So here it's important. So like this one, I'll give you 1 A or B for 50 million, and that discards the card. This one will give you 2 A through C at 80 million. Now, the higher level ones are better, but you can't have higher level ones unless you have lower level ones to form a base for them. And again, is this all explained here? Not really, I think. Okay, you can build a railway link to your location. That will cost you $30. If it's a corporation, it could build it to any of the locations that it controls that don't have a link yet. You can purchase a switch train through a Capex card. Here, you pay the cost of the train, and you get that level of train. Or you can purchase a switch train from a railway company. And for this, I guess, from what I understand, you're allowed to pay anywhere between $1 and twice the value of the switch train by converting that railroad's regular train into a switch train. Now, this is not great, because if you look at this, like this cost the railway 100. The most you can give them is 100. Here, it costs 180. The most you can give them is 160. So you're not going to be throwing a lot of money into your corporation this way. But it is a way to transfer money from the Montans into the corporations for a useful item. And what we're going to see is that everything that these produce, whether trains, switch trains, or developments, is scrapped along with the trains that they go with, and we'll see that when we hit it. Essentially, okay. The development tiles remain as merely bases for others, that didn't stick in my head. Okay, so you're able to do one of those things. Now, a Montan, and actually both types of corporation can do this. They can sell a share. Oh, you're only allowed to do one. Okay, you can sell one of your shares out of the initial offering into the bank pool. This is a way to ease your capitalization. Only 50% of the shares can be in the bank pool, as is normal. And like a lot of the partial cap games, not like 1830, you're going to generate revenue for what's in your initial offering. The bank pool is generating revenue for the bank. It doesn't go to anyone. But you could also instead buy a share from the bank pool. This can be done at any time during your turn. So just before a run, you might want to buy a share in so that you get the increase from the run. Often when you're selling, because it's going to decrease the value anyway, you do that just before the run as well, because you're probably going to decrease the value anyway, and it's at best going to come out even, and you're probably going to be swallowing at that point. I thought you could sell more than one share, which gives you a lot of flexibility towards, making enough capital to buy the improvements you want. No, you're only allowed to do one. So that was something I screwed up and just noticed. Okay. The operating round ends when everything finishes its turn. Okay, there's going to be there's always two operating rounds in between stock rounds. Once the 4 CAPEX is first bought, we'll get this special round in between the operating rounds and the stock round. Actually, there's not always 2 operating rounds. End of game causes a special case. Okay, the CAPEX cards. So these are weird. I've already talked about them quite a bit. They're gonna enforce this shit with the phase changes. They can be used as trains, they can be used as switch trains, they can be used as development counters for here. The development counters, you get more than one for your cost. If you don't have enough room or cannot place all your development counters, you can put them in your treasury on the Montan companies, but not the corporations. And I don't know where that's stated. It's not here. Okay. Now we go to the capital expenditures of Montan companies, which is a little bit more complex. For the railroad companies, they're basically just buying trains, so it's very much like every other XX. Some of the grammar is really crappy here. By purchasing CAPEX cards, a Montan company may as much development marker place on its charter as black squares are stated on the CAPEX chart. Okay, whatever. So the type of marker only goes in the row that is supported. Only the development markers stated on the CAPEX card can be purchased or received. If there's a little railway marker there, you have to have a connected railway to do that. Now, those don't exist on here, and that's because you can't form one of these corporations unless at least one of the Montan companies is the only way you can form the corporation is by turning a Montan company that's already got a track connection. That could be one that you own, or it could be one of the unaligned or inactive ones that's already had a rail connection paid for by someone else. Okay. You can only place a B if there's an A in the row below the same column, and this continues upwards. So you need a base. So like you need to build an A before you can build the first B. You need a B before you can build the first C, and likewise for the second ones. And yeah. Okay. From phase 4 onwards, you may need to buy like type A's that don't produce any income for you to form a base for the higher level stuff. The inactive ones are placed backside up. You are allowed somewhere, it doesn't say it yet here. It says it here. Okay. As soon as a Monton places its first type E, this is corporations only, you won't have companies anymore, they will switch from a 20 to a 30. And that's going to be an added value for every railway that runs through that space. Again, that's a reason why you may want your own, your companies, your Monton companies, and eventually your corporations to be relatively close to you. But the first company that merges in is the one that gets this big marker. The other companies are all going to have small markers on the board. Okay. For steel mills and coal mines, there are different types of development markers, red and black, and you're limited by the counter mix of the two different colors. Probably not going to overcome it, but we'll see. Because I wasn't playing it by the rules properly. Okay, if a PMG has more dev markers than it can place, the surplus goes in the treasury. This will often happen if it doesn't have a railway link. A PMG may not acquire new development markers as long as there's one in the treasury, though. So you're able to collect one set of surplus, but you have to fix that situation before you can get another. As soon as they can be placed in corresponding boxes, it's carried out immediately, even out of turn of the company. This could happen when the company has built the railroad link. A PMG is not required or not forced to acquire only those development markers which it can place at the time of purchase. It may acquire more than it has development boxes. Probably not a great idea, but maybe maybe you want to burn through cards and you don't have a space for them. When you form a corporation, you might be able to use them. Maybe you want to eat up the resources. I don't know. Development markers on company charters, either on development boxes or in the treasury, cannot be exchanged with other companies nor with the stock. Okay. Development markers can become inactive. They flip face down in that case. They provide a base, but they don't provide any income anymore. A PMG can be filled with inactive development markers, and then it just doesn't do anything, really. It doesn't produce any income anymore. You might be able to get money into it. Or you might have money in it that can generate something. You might be able to move. No. You might be able to create a rail link for it that allows it to hook up. The railway link? Okay. A Monton corporation will have a railway link automatically due to the way it's formed. For an active PMG, that's the private or the minor companies, it can be bought by that company for 30 marks from its own treasury, and it'll get this connection marker. A Monton corporation can buy additional connections for its other locations by paying that same $30 if they're not connected already. As soon as a PMG has a railway link, it gets its little location marker, one of these things, flipped over so that the 10 shows up. And again, that's going to increase the value of that hex for any rails that run through it or into it. The income of the railway companies and routes of the PMG is increased by 10. The PMG may now use the boxes with the track sign for placing their development markers. And the PMG is allowed to convert into a Monton corporation. If it's active, it has to have 5 or more developments on it, but that includes the rail link, oddly, which isn't a development, I think, but I don't know. An active PMG is allowed to buy a switch engine, which are cheaper than the normal trains, but you could also buy one off of a working corporation. The W2 switch engines are perfectly fine. They don't disappear from the phase chart. I don't remember what they come in on. I think like the 4. Yeah. Oh no, the 3 has them. And the 4 has the W3. And then past that, there are no more switch engines available from what I can tell. You'd have to buy them off corporations. A switch engine can be acquired from a Capex card. You pay the amount on the train symbol TAUT Bank. The Capex card is removed from the game and a switch engine. So this is the only place where I think it talks about the Capex card being removed from the game. Maybe it says it with the development. Yeah, it doesn't seem to say it on the development markers. But I'm inferring that no matter what you buy, development markers, switch trains, or regular trains go on the corporate charter, but whatever you buy with the Monton companies, you discard a Capex card for it. Okay. So the Monton can buy a Capex card and pay the amount on the train symbol, and it gets a switch engine of the appropriate type. There's no advantage to buying the 3 switch engine. It's just very, very expensive. And then later ones, you're going to have anything that comes after the 4 train, anything that comes off a permanent train. Once the permanent trains are available, the only way you can get the switch engines is buying them off companies. This is a big deal, though, because quite often in like 1830, and the structure of this phase chart is similar to 1830s. Quite often you're stuck. You're in a position where you have an extra 3 train you'd like to get rid of in order to buy another train, and you're not able to do anything. Well, if you have one of these or one of these, you can buy a switch train off of the corporation. Like I said, no, it's worse than that. You have to pay at least 10 marks, not 1, and a maximum of 150% of that. So I thought this went up to double. It actually only goes up to 150%, so 75. But the big reason is probably it's a way to get a train off of you. The Capex card is removed from the game and a switch engine is placed on the Monton company. The switch engine marker is placed on the charter, has all be oft the same type as shown in the Capex card. If such a switch engine marker is not available, you can't purchase it. So, yeah, you can't get switch engines off the permanent trains, period, which is fine. A Monton company may not own more switch engines than there are dedicated boxes, but it can scrap one at every suitable time. So basically, you can buy more than you have room for, you just can't use them. A Monton cannot sell its switch engine. The switch engine increases the income of the owning Monton by the value of its highest active development marker. If the company only has inactive development marker, it's not worth shit. Now, corporations, the Monton corporations, must place all acquired development markers on the development boxes of its charter. It cannot place them in the treasury box. and it must possess at least one active development marker. If it has only inactive markers, it must buy a CAPEX card to get active development markers. If it doesn't have enough money to do so, it becomes like a forced train purchase where the owner is going to be forced to sell stocks and whatnot. Corporations. Yeah, we got a few special things here. Do I want to break again? Let's break again. I'm really fatigued. And I don't know. it's just harder to press through, and I can just go smoke or something instead. They're going to work well. We'll talk about them. For track lays, let me make sure I'm catching this right. As far as I understand it, you're allowed to lay 2 tracks, at least one of which must be yellow. You can upgrade with the second one, or the first one, it doesn't matter. The track, see, I always get confused, but because these aren't kind of angled at all, but it's angle track as opposed to curvature, which makes the board more open. It also, to me, means it's harder to find the best routes because you have more opportunities. But it also makes blocking harder, all kind of stuff like that. Now let me see. I'm looking to see what we have a bunch of different special things. We have 2 D spaces. We have an E space. Those have their own dedicated tiles for them going all the way up. Steel has its own green space, which I don't think expands to anything. Not sure. Yeah, it does not. It dead ends. There's some weird things here. I've already talked about the Montan spaces. Anything that has one of these stars in it that's not a D or E upgrades to these in green. I'm sorry. These guys in green, which are sort of double doinker looking upgrades. This is their yellow version. Again, a double doinker. But doinkers with one of these get a normal doinker on them, but then they upgrade to this type of track. Okay, that all makes sense. And then they upgrade, and there may not be enough for every location. I'm not sure. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, no, there's more than that. They upgrade to these for brown, which don't upgrade any further. So, now, one weird thing about these is you see the M is off the track here, but then it ends up in the track in these others. They fill that circle. I don't know why they moved it onto the circle, except maybe I can't think of a reason, because there's room for a double doinker, but maybe there wasn't room to put it off to the side. But I really don't understand what they're doing with these. But they do fill the circle box, and they don't serve any purpose for railroads or anything in terms of like in terms of blocking, in terms of allowing rails to run through them or anything. And you can't, what would kind of make sense is if those did become stations and you could somehow coordinate and combine rail and the Montans, but yeah, it's just not the case. I'm looking for where it says I can build 2. I swear I saw it. At the start of the game, only yellow, the new track must be... it's first turn. The cost on the hex is paid. Kind of an interesting thing. Some of these rivers don't have a cost. Okay, I am absolutely convinced that I'm allowed to lay 2 track. But I'm not seeing it here. I need to fucking find this. And maybe it's written somewhere else. Again, these rules are not as organized, are not as well organized as I'm used to. Found it. It's way over here in the rules for corporations. Like, not in here, not mentioned, not referred to. It's like the fact that there's 2 different places where it talks about the operating round is just annoying. Place up to 2 yellow tiles or upgrade 1 track and place 1 yellow, or promote a yellow or green printed hexes and place 1 yellow. Okay. You can buy a station marker. You can buy one even on your first turn. The costs are a little different than usual. They start at 60, then go to 80, then 100. You get to run your trains, you pay your income, the share price is altered, and then you can buy with Capex cards. I believe train companies are allowed to buy more than 1 train. In fact, I know they are, just like in most games. But remember, the development companies can't utilize more than 1 Capex card in a turn. Station markers, normal rules for these, I believe. 1 per tile, so you can't fill both double doinkers. That's pretty normal too. You have to leave a space where any corporation has a home tile. For the most part, there aren't, a lot of the companies are like red starting locations. So, operating trains, pretty standard rules here, except, as far as I can tell, and this is the answers to the questions in the version 2 rules, which supposedly didn't change the rules, but I think have, indicate there are plus trains. These rules, doinkers are free. You're able to run through doinkers without them costing any of your train value, which means you want an infinite number of doinkers in your route. If there are plus trains, that makes it more complex. What I would assume with plus trains is that all the trains are like, this is a 2+2, this is a 3+3 under the new rules. It definitely makes the whole design more complicated, where you're like, when you have to deal with plus trains, you're looking at trying to get the right number of doinkers as opposed to all the doinkers you can get. But yeah, I'm going to go with the rules that I have. The doinkers, I understand why plus trains might be appealing to some people. I just don't see adding that complexity, even if it got changed because of that desire. One of the key elements with operating the trains is that these things produce extra money no matter what you're running through. Now, there are no hexes with one of these things that doesn't have some kind of city location on it, even if it's a stoinker. And eventually they all upgrade, to multiple cities or whatever. But if there were, you could get value off of them, I guess, for that. I don't know. But anyway, these start off with no bonus. When the railway connection is made, they go up to a +10 bonus. When one of them is turned into a corporation, they get a 20-point bonus. They already were connected with that one. And then when they get an E, that corporate center goes up to a 30-point bonus. So the companies which are initially merged as sort of the headquarters of the Montan corporations, those locations can add a lot of value to a hex. In addition, we can see some of the gray tiles for the maximum rates. The D's and E's go up to 60s. The normal Montans go up to 50. And remember, all of these are going to have the potential to have at least a +10 on them, and maybe up to a +30 as well. So these cities are worth a lot. Now, the other thing that's worth a lot, or could be worth a lot, we have this up here, which creates the number of connected Montans that your route runs through times 10. Now that could be a huge number, but it probably isn't going to be. Over here, it's the number of coal mines, the black Montans, that you run through that are connected times 20. Again, sounds really appealing, but honestly, you start looking and you're like, yeah, I could get this and this. Maybe I could get these 3. I don't know. But we're not looking at like numbers that really outstrip some of the other red zones. You can't run through red zones, obviously. The director gets to decide if the dividend's paid. It's pretty normal. There's no jumps on this stock track. It's one space at a time. It's kind of like the old 1829, I think. I don't know, 1829 had jumps, didn't it? I don't know. Anyway, it's a very simple stock market. In fact, when we get to selling shares, you're going to see that doesn't even have much effect. If you pay the dividend that's not 0, then the stock market... Oh, no, I was wrong. Okay, if a company pays a dividend, then its share price rises when the dividend is greater than 0 but less... Yeah, so I just read this. When the dividend was greater than 0 but less than the stock value, the stock market remains in the same box. Well, that's annoying. That wording made me play it completely wrong, and I had these things just moving up. So I think they would have moved up all the time anyhow. But yeah, that's... because these valuations are pretty low, and I never got into this high level. But yeah, the wording fucking threw me for a loop there. If you don't pay any dividend, your share price drops back a space. And it then talks about convention. Purchase trains. You're allowed to buy more than one train, but the first, you have to buy them one at a time. because new limits may occur, etc. All pretty standard stuff. You're allowed to buy trains from other companies. There's a limitation on this. I'm looking to see. I mean, they have this horrible wording here. Trains may purchase 2 Montan companies where they become switch engines. Yeah, a Montan company can buy a train off a corporation. And it doesn't spell out that, like, I can't do this with permanent trains, but they don't have one on there. And there seemed to be something that indicated that in the questions or something. Again, the rules are really crappy. Now, I'm looking for where it talks about buying trains off other companies. And it's not here. But you know where I think it is? Trains may be purchased as a consequence each. No. I don't know. All right. Forced train purchases. I'm looking for this, and I think it may be in here. If several trains are on offer, bank pool from other corporations, the director has free choice. The train's price cannot be higher than its printed price. Somewhere it must say that you can purchase from other players or from other corporations. There we go. Trains may be bought and sold between railway corporations. It's anywhere between 1 mark. The purchase price is freely chosen. But if it's a forced train purchase, yeah, you're allowed to pay any amount. That's pretty normal. The Montan aren't allowed to throw infinite money in, though. The director has free choice. The train's price may not be higher than its printer price. So you can do a forced train purchase from one of your corporations up to the printed price of that train. That's a big deal. That could create some weird situations I'm not used to. The director has to make up the difference, and that'll leave the company with no money in their treasury after the purchase. And they may have to sell stocks. They can only sell shares if there's no change in directorship of the acting corporation. And if you can't sell enough shares, the player's bankrupt. There's some possibility of this because you're only allowed to sell 1 share from the initial offering during your operating round. So there's some danger that a company could be hit pretty hard. If a player goes bankrupt, his remaining shares are put in the bank pool, which may end up with more than 50% in there. The director's share may end up in there. Stock value is not affected by this. If there's a director in the bank pool, it's handed to the player who's entitled to the directorship due to the shares. If nobody has the minimum shares, nobody gets the directorship. They say the banker should run the company. I don't know about that. He withholds all income. He only acquires Capex card when this is mandatory. If there's not enough money in the treasury, the bank gives a loan. This has to pay back as soon as possible. There's nothing to deal with loans or anything like that, but basically, I guess this is kind of like borrowing a train, except that you'll have negative money, you know, and we'll figure out. By the way, the game does come with, I didn't mention this, component-wise, it comes with money. I think that's always a good idea. Not interested in using that particularly. It's not pretty money like the Mayfair money, so I'm like, definitely just going to use my chips. Did have to Arrange the bank, it's $13,000 because bank running out is an issue. So the game continues after a bankruptcy, which I think is kind of cool. One of the things that fucks up 1830 and the conventions is the bankruptcy rules. It causes, like, one player going bankrupt and ending the game means that everybody, in order to improve your chances of winning, you need to run your companies recklessly. And you might take some steps to prevent yourself from having to go bankrupt. So like you could juggle trains or something between two companies. But basically, out of the people who play their companies recklessly, one of them will go bankrupt and end the game. That's a mindset that may not work if you had like 2 out of 6 players playing recklessly. It may not be a good move, and certainly one would lose. But given that, like, at tournaments the goal is to come in first or maybe second, it's definitely to your advantage, especially in the early rounds, to play very, very recklessly. And I just don't like that. Like, and we never see that in games that I'm used to playing. You never see that because nobody wants the game to end that way. But to maximize your chances in the tournaments, that's what you want to do in 1830, and it just creates this stupid kind of play. Okay. When a Capex card of the next type is done, we hit the game phases. Let's go through the game phases, and then I'll pause because I'm almost out of battery. So we got a train limit of 4 yellow tiles. You're always able to buy trains from other companies. Development markers, so A and B development markers, W1s are available. And the lower value of the off-board connection. Okay. Phase 3 adds the C and the W2 over here. And it adds green tiles. Phase 4 kills the 2s, puts a train limit of 3. We got more development markers. A's become inactive. That can really hurt your Montans if you've built up a lot of them. And the train rush can be kind of brutal. By the way, among components, there are these optional additional trains to make the train rush a little bit more mellow. I don't know how I feel about them. But I figured I'd play with the regular base. And since I didn't play a game that worked out well because I didn't get the rules right, I'm gonna go with it again. Although I have misgivings, the train rush can be huge in this. Okay, we'll start adding a Montan round. I'll talk about this later after the first 4 train is bought. That'll show up here. And then the BME directorship goes away, which might cause the presidency to shift if somebody else has more shares. The 5 train, this is the first permanent train. Browns are available. Train limit is 2. We go up in value on the red spaces. And B's on the improvements, developments, become inactive now. Again, that can cut into your wages, just like losing trains can. On the 6th, the 3 trains become obsolete. W1 switch engines are scrapped. As soon as the first 6 is bought, 8s are available. And these really aren't, these are just trains now, I guess, because they don't have pictures of other stuff. All the PMGs that players own, these things, they now become passive PMGs at the beginning of the next stock round. You have one more Monton phase to dispose of them. You can probably get rid of one, maybe more, but otherwise you lose everything that you have in them. They become an inactive company. No, they can be included in corporations still, but yeah. And then when the 8 train comes out, we add gray tiles. There aren't a lot of them. 4 trains become obsolete, and the C improvements become inactive. All right, we're going to pause there because I'm almost out of battery, and dealing with the Monton, this is all new stuff for this. Well, for me, this is new stuff for this game. This may be similar to the other design that uses this. These I know were new to the game, the concept of the capital expenditures. So, like I said, there's this Monton round, and that's where you're able to essentially either float a new Monton company by merging corporation, by merging one of the Monton companies, either active or inactive, or incorporate and merge one of your Monton companies into a corporation. Let's take a look at this. Now, the Monton stocks can be bought during the normal stock round. We'll get to that. The stock round is the last thing they cover, which again, that's fairly odd. But they start as soon as the first 4 capex is bought. It starts with the person who has the priority deal. It's not going to move the priority deal though. So during the Monton rounds, you get you basically get 2 opportunities to be first with priority. So that's kind of neat. You still only have the cash from your 2 operating rounds, but you're not able to sell shares during the Monton round. So it's quite possible that you might be able to do something in the Monton round, get an advantage of that off the priority deal, and then also start a corporation, or at least buy, a particularly interesting stock, or maybe dump a company that you don't like anymore, or whatever. Each player gets 1 chance to found a new corporation, a new Monton corporation. You're only allowed to found 1 each Monton round. You can use either one of your active PMGs. I don't know what that stands for, but or you could use a passive PMG on the board along with your own cash. In both cases, the PMG has to have a railway link. The active one, in addition, has to have at least 5 development markers on it, but this includes the connection marker, which isn't really a development marker, and it's very cheap comparatively. It only costs 30, and you might not, you could create it with one of these. You might create it with one of your rail corporations. Okay. So first, if you have an active PMG, you choose a Monton where you have whose director share is still in the initial offering. You state which of your active PMGs you want to convert. The location marker of this PMG will be replaced by the location marker of the Monton Corporation, which are these taller things to distinguish them, and you'll get it at side 20. Now, the banker then determines the share value of this. This is going to be 10 times the number of development markers on the charter of the PMG. That's going to give you a minimum of 50. I'm trying to see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't know if any have more than 10. Yeah, I think the most they have is 10, but I'm not positive of that. But yeah, that's going to give you a starting price somewhere between 50 and 100. But anyway, we're back here. The banker gives the players the director's share and the charter of the Monton. The status marker, which will be over here, is removed from there and placed in the left circle on the top of the charter, way up there. Then you move everything from the PMG's charter to the Monton Corporation charter, and then the PMG charter is removed from the game. This is very much like converting minors in some games that allow you to turn minors into corporations. And then you're allowed to acquire a normal 20% share of the founded Monton Corporation, either by merging another active PMG of the same industry type that you own. Now here they say merger details 12.2, or simply purchase it and pay the stock value into the Monton Corporation treasury. This gives you a reason to have two of the same type of Montons, because some of these only have 2. Some of them have 3. I think there's one with 2 and 2 with 3. The ones with 3 have room for an extra switching train. That can allow you to basically save a couple of your companies that may be in very bad shape, a couple of your Monton companies that are in very bad shape, maybe not producing money or anything, turn them into a corporation. Now it's able to access stock purchases, to get additional cash into it, to get it kick-started. This might well happen if, like, you had all A's or A's and B's or something, and they're closed out. The B's die with the 5 train. Now, this makes it look like when you float it, you're allowed to either merge or buy another share immediately. We'll talk about that later, because this refers to the merger, but you get another round where you're allowed to merge things in. And I did not realize all of this because, again, the rules are really poorly set up, and it's very easy to miss something because of the way they're written. Anyway, your other option would be to take one of the passive PMGs on the board that's already linked by rail. You choose a Monton whose director shares in the initial offering, the corporation. You state which passive you want to convert. The location marker of this, that's the marker on the board, but will presumably be one of these instead of the numbered marker. And that really disturbs me. But maybe you take the numbered location marker. I'm not sure what they're trying to say. The location marker will be replaced by the location marker of the Monton Corporation with its side 20. Yes. I would probably move the number marker into play, even if you had one of those there, because you want to know the number that it controls. So it's kind of fucked up. Anyway, I'm really not sure that I want to use these for anything. Then what do? Then you choose a starting value based on the game phase, i.e. if you're in the green section, you can only pick green or yellows. You can't pick the brown cost. The banker puts the stock marker there. The banker gives the player the director's share and charter, but the player pays the stock value of the director's share. Now these are 20% shares, so you got to pay twice, just like you would with a corporation, like with a corporation's 20% shares. So if you set it at, 75, you owe $150. That money goes into the Montan Corporation. So now you've converted something that nobody had control over into something that you have 20% of, which is kind of neat. The player takes the development markers according to this table. Okay, so if you're in the green phase, you'd get 3 stage A and 1 stage B. But if you're in later phases, you get more counters. Now, no matter what, the stage A's will be inactive. And stage B or stage C may be inactive, depending on, well, I think in gray, stage C is inactive. Yeah, I think these are all inactive no matter what. I'm not sure. Brown, B's are inactive. And once you get gray, C's are inactive. So yeah, no matter what you're getting here is just inactive shit. So you're not going to make money off of it right away if you float it this way. Then you're allowed to get a 20% share either by merging another PMG of the industry type that you control, or simply purchase it and put the extra money into the Montan's treasury. Okay, now we hit merging of active PMGs with Montan corporations. I think this happens after the guy who formed it has an option to put a second company in. After all players who want to found a Montan corporation have finished this process, another round takes place in which the player can merge their active PMG with a Montan corporation. You can choose only founded Montan corporation which has still shares in the initial offering. Okay. It has to have already been merged into place, and there has to be shares left. More than that, there has to be circle spaces left as well, which may be more of a limitation. Beginning with the player who holds priority deal, that player the players that decide again if they want to do a merger or pass, they all get as many choices as they want. Well, they may not have opportunities, but as for the conversion of the PMG and Montan Corporation involved in a merger, must be of the same industry type. But you can merge in PMGs that don't have a railway link. The merger is carried out with the following steps. You state which PMG you want to merge with which Montan. The status marker of the PMG is removed from the stock table and placed on the empty circle. Again, the status marker is what is up here. All possessions of the PMG are moved to the Montan Corporation charter. Excessive development markers, i.e. that go beyond the boxes that would normally go into your treasury, go back into the stock because the Montan Corporation can't hold those extras. Extra switch engines go back to the stock as well. There's stuff that's not mentioned here. For example, you get a 20% share I assume you don't pay anything for it. All kind of stuff. This is a great way. So quite often, I did things wrong, but quite often you're forming a corporation in order, like you might want to merge one that's on the board that'll give you some of this shit, paying money, and then merge into that one of your kind of broken ones so that you get shares out of it. And if, you might be able to get lots of it in there. Okay. Floating a Montan Corporation. If at the end of the stock round, there are still more than 40% of the company shares in the initial offering, the shares in excess to 40% will be moved into the bank pool. The corporation receives the stock value of the moved shares into the treasury. For each share which has been moved into the bank pool, the stock market is moved one box to the left, i.e. it lowers in value. So if you can't sell it out, it's going to drop in stock value, but you are going to get the initial cash in there for the extra shares. So if nobody else merges in or whatever, and you've only put one company into it, you'll get two of those 20% shares, and 4 times your starting value dropped into your bank, into your treasury. Okay. In the brown or gray phase, when you start a Montan, you get the stock value for all the shares, and they all go into the bank pool without dropping its value. This is the full capitalization, and this is going to work even though we haven't seen it yet with the train corporations. They also, if they're started in the brown, then all their shares go into the bank pool and all the cash gets in there. But you still have to float it to 50% for that to happen. You don't have to float these. So the key to these is a 20% share can still run. Okay. And of course, 40% might be in the company treasury, as it were. Transforming active PMGs. During the Montan round, following the operating round in which the first Type 6 CAPEX card has been purchased, that's going to put you to where the 8s can be bought, actually. The owner of a still active PMG has a last chance to convert or merge it. At the end of that Montan round, if any active PMGs, if any players have active PMGs, they turn into passive ones. Their status marker is removed and replaces the location marker on the map with its blank side face up. That doesn't make any goddamn sense. What they're saying is, at least to me, I don't know. I don't know what's intended by this. So here are your two markers. This is the status marker. This would have been on the board, like this. Let's say it's been rail converted. Now they're saying it's no longer rail converted, and it's just this. And I'm like, that seems like a pile of bullshit to me. I couldn't find anything about that, but it would basically cut the rail connection, and it would, the company's still available to be merged and started. Maybe it's not. Maybe that's the whole point, is it's not. But it's going to hurt the rail connections for everybody? I don't know. Maybe it's just a closed company is basically the idea behind it, is that you can't do anything with it. But there's something fucked up about that because, yeah, maybe it's just a dead company at that point and nobody can use it. All right, I'll buy that. Okay. The stock round. Let me swap batteries and I'll get to this. I mean, if inactive basically means it turns from being able to produce extra money, and it would be able to at some point in the game, because I think once you hit brown, the rail connection automatically happens, to, yeah, there's just nothing there. Now, you know what's really ugly? It still blocks this. Just weird. Anyway, the stock round. You are able to sell any number of shares you like, and then buy up to 1 share. Everything is dealt with at the current stock price. Things in the initial offering, things in the bank pool, all goes that way. The only difference is, if it's in the initial offering, the money goes to the corporation. If it's in the bank pool, it goes to the bank. Priority, first person to pass in a series of passes gets the priority on everything except the first stock round. Okay. In the different phases, yellow, you can start corporations at this rate. Green, it goes up to the 80, and then browns and grays, it goes up from 50 to 100. You can't buy the director's share of a Montan corporation. You have to do a conversion first. If you sell a company, if you sell shares of a company, you can't buy those shares back in the same stock round. I don't know how big a deal that is. Like, that's a rule that comes from 1830, basically. And maybe it was in the 29s as well. But in 1830, it was a big deal because you could make money by buying a share and selling a share. And in most of those, in many XX games, you can do that. Here you don't make money. There's no arbitrage going on the shares. It kind of is an unnecessary rule, I feel, in this game, but we'll play with it. I'm used to it, so it doesn't really make a difference. But like, what it means is you got to be careful what you dump. You got to be careful what you get rid of. Yeah. Once 50% of a company's shares have been sold from the initial offering, the company is floated. We got our share limits here. If a corporation is floated during brown or gray phase, all of its remaining initial offering shares move into the bank pool, and it gets the full 100% capitalization. And you kind of need it. The trades are expensive. No more than 50% can be in the bank pool except due to like bankruptcy. You can't sell any shares in the initial stock round, and you can't sell shares of a company that has not had an operating round yet. That's particularly weird, or is going to be particularly kind of problematic, because you might have created them in the Montan phase, and they don't get, you don't get the ability to sell those. So that's kind of a, yeah, you go from one phase to the other, and like, you have to remember that. Okay. The only thing that drops prices is if the corporation sells shares to the bank pool, the price drops. That includes the forced sale, as it were, that montants might have when they're first converted. If the director himself sells any number of shares from his holdings, that drops the value by one space. There's no increasing due to being sold out. There's no limit to the number of shares that you can hold in a given corporation. This is interesting. I like it. I've always felt like there was something wrong with that 60% limit. And it's one of the things that I kind of liked about 1835 was that it doesn't have a limit. You can hold the whole thing. Because honestly, this is how companies actually go from public to private, is they buy out all the shares. And it's very suitable here. The game ends. Okay. If the bank runs out of money in an operating round during the brown phase, then the current operating rounds will be completed, wherever you are. I don't think it can happen during the stock phase. I don't know what happens if somebody breaks the bank in the stock phase and there's not enough money. I'm really disturbed by that. I think, that's going to be a real problem. But I don't think it's likely to happen. But anyway. Because you're going to have to give IOUs out during that stock phase. And then if in the operating round, if it's not fixed by the end of the stock phase, yeah, you're just going to play out the operating round and you can throw the extra money in there. Okay, the other thing is the first Type 8 train, or Capex card, not train, has been bought because it could be bought by a Monton. The current set of operating rounds will be completed, followed by a last stock round of the game, and then another set of 3 operating rounds will be completed. The third operating round will be done in the Monton round. There won't be a Monton round then. And then the winner is as normal. I didn't go too much over this. There are some interesting facets in it. You got to be kind of careful. Things like these Monton AGs. It's kind of hard to see what's going on here. Got a 3 somewhere. That's these. Yeah, so single boinker doinkers with a Monton turn into those Monton AGs, and there's only 3 of them, and they don't upgrade. But, so that's kind of a weird thing, because basically you're expanding one of these doinkers that everybody's counting on to be able to run through without having to utilize a stop into something that requires a stop. So you might want to create those out where you're not impacted, because honestly, going through a Monton, it's going to be 10. Plus the Monton's value, which could be up to 30, but it doesn't count against your train total at all. Anyway, that's that. I'm interested in this game, but it was a pain in the ass to play and to remember the rules and everything. In part because maybe they didn't sink in all that well. They're hard to find the various things. I feel like having played it, having started it twice, basically, I didn't go through the bidding again. I just rewound back to the situation where the bidding had happened. And hit some of the pain points and the major rules mistakes, like things that invalidate. The first game was just so invalidated that like I couldn't continue. The second one, I made mistakes that were big enough that like it wouldn't have been worth finishing anyway. I didn't learn enough about the end game because I misplayed how those developments show up. And then other little mistakes that happened in it. I'll tell you one that was very, very easy to make is that these are the yellow markers that go in things like this or this. That's weird. These don't look like double cities to me. And they end up merging eventually, like they're a double doinker here, but they end up merging into these eventually. And then these guys, they don't have special chits for them. They have this. They'll have a token on them. But then this upgrades to this, which does have an M on it. And it's just, it's like, this isn't all spelled out in the rules, except by zoning out on this maybe. You can see here, like they note this with this plus this gives you one of those. Well, I expect it to be written in the rules, right? I don't expect to have to study the charts to have any idea of what the game is doing. Anyway, that caused me some issues. Trying to figure out the different things here caused me some issues. I'm going to start with, I don't know which packet I'm going to start with. I'm going to do a 6-player game, but I started with this packet. This one looks similar to it. They're all going to be, I don't think it's going to make too big a difference. They're all going to be 4 reds and 4 blacks, right? Yeah, they're all 4 red and 4 black, and it's just kind of a little bit of a difference in terms of, how they interact with the different companies, with the different corporations to some extent. But I don't know how big a difference it makes. Some of these are very, very different than others. And, I forgot to mention one thing. When you buy these suckers, you pay this price, they have a starting amount of money that's listed in them. That's very different from how like miners normally work. And if you were to use a bidding or auction type mechanism, I would kind of want excess money to go into the miner or the montant. But I don't know. Like I said, this isn't quite what I was hoping for. What I was hoping for was something where the development was more integrated in the sense that like sort of where the industry is being built up and everything would actually see, one thing that I was looking at is I wanted something sort of like Silverton, where I'm taking the coal and getting it to the steel mills. And it doesn't, it's all happening kind of abstractly, right? These things just operate as they do. Sure, the coal and steel mills make more money once they're connected. They can buy the connecting rail or whatever it's called. What do they call it? Switch engine. They can buy the switch engine, and that improves their value. Those switch engines tend to be cheaper than these, but honestly, these produce more, right? So here's the thing. Let's say I have a choice. If I'm getting a C, that's producing 30 per, okay? But I get 2 of them. If I'm buying a switch engine for the same price, I only get one of my top rated locations doubled. Now, because of bases and all that, yeah, it can work out so that maybe you can make more money off the switch engine. But the switch engine is actually more expensive. Not only does it only give you one of these things as a scoring, it's also more expensive because you have to do the hookup. You have to do that $30 connection fee. Now, maybe you don't have to do it from your Montan. Maybe you do it from a corporation. It's good for the corporation. Maybe the Montan does it and it helps the corporation. Again, you want some locality between your Montans and your RailNet. You may want some correspondence where you're buying just steel or just coal. I don't know. But anyway, I was hoping for something where we had, kind of the coal being an input to the steel, and maybe the steel being an input going to various cities, kind of the way like Steam and some other games work. But I wanted something more like not Silverton, more like Lords of the Sierra Madre, where something you're buying goes into something else, and I also wanted some supply and demand type effects on it, which is to say, if there's a lot more coal being produced than the steel companies can take. Sure, the cities can take coal too because they're using it for heating and everything, but that the valuation of what the coal companies can make isn't just how much coal they pull, it's also the price of coal, and it's the price of steel, and the price of finished goods. So I was kind of thinking I'd want a 3-tier thing, and maybe the rail, the trains availability is actually limited. A much, much more complicated design, but I wanted it to use a basis of an 18XX style, but I think I'm asking too much, but that's kind of the game that I've envisioned, and one of the reasons I picked this up is, look, it's handling the coal and the steel, it's handling all this stuff, and I do like the way it integrates. I think it works out well with these CapExes, from what I've seen so far, in the sense that like you're competing over the same industrial base, and the improvements in the coal and steel are going to drive forward the rails as much as buying new trains does. All struck me as appropriate. I think I'm going to have to switch batteries, and then we'll load this up and probably get started today. I don't know.